Welcome to the Living in the Future podcast, where we bring to light specialized topics from life in the modern age. This episode, I'll be talking to two people about their projects to digitize out of copyright works and make them more accessible. One project dealing with music and another with books. Today I'm talking with Aaron Dunn, the marketing lead of Musopen.org, a nonprofit site that intends to provide zero-cost and public domain resources for and recordings of classical music. Aaron, why is it important to provide public domain recordings, and how do they differ from zero-cost resources?
That's a great question. When I started this project, it was actually due to confusion about copyright laws, which may answer your question about the importance. I was a young student in college, and I saw a CD had an FBI warning. It was a CD of a Mozart piano concerto, and it said copyright, something like copying this or reproducing it will result in, breaking federal laws. I'm like, Mozart's been dead hundreds of years. How could this still possibly be under copyright? And then I quickly learned, well, the original published music, the sheet music, is public domain, but the recordings aren't, which made me think, well, what's the use of public domain law if nothing will ever ultimately be in the public domain? So that was the inception of someone ought to start something without a commercial intent, so that stuff that belongs in the public domain or has fallen into it ultimately can exist there. So the value in my mind is a couple things. One is to act as kind of a platform, or let's say something to spark the imagination of creators. I mean, today we call things remixes. Which is ironic because frequently many of those use copywritten material and could be taken down at any moment. But it shows the value that people place on being able to take an idea, play with it, and create something new. So one is just having a resource where they can do that and not be afraid of the consequences. Another is to ensure access to things and ensuring that there isn't an indefinite cost to having access to some really amazing cultural achievements, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and the whole classical musical genre. And finally, I also thought this, as a personal fan of classical music, could be a great way to introduce people casually that might be intimidated by it or think of it as being this old stuffy art form, that it's actually super rich and very accessible. And one way to do that, especially for younger people, is just make it free and put it online. So that was kind of the inception behind this.
We could wait for the 78s to become in the public domain with all these recordings, but when you recorded on the Kickstarter, you did at a much higher quality recording with an orchestra in Europe. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk a little bit about that Kickstarter experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The first Kickstarter that we did was actually when the Kickstarter platform itself launched. So we saw this as a great way to be one of the first on a new platform, trying something with a really web-savvy group of potential backers. So the first project was basically, let's hire a super well-known, well-regarded orchestra to do something they've never done, which is to give away all the rights to the music, but for a good cause. Usually they do this for movies or video games. We wanted to do it just for the benefit of the public. And it was an interesting experience, both connecting with people and raising money, many of whom had no interest in classical music, and which surprised us because that's what they're giving money for, as well as the groups, which at first we talked to some very big names that were very interested and then got cold feet and said, we don't want our name associated with this, because their business model is selling access to music. They don't want to set a precedent for losing royalties. So we got a bunch of high-profile musicians with our own name, the Musopen Symphony Orchestra, and we're pretty happy with the end result.
I mean, it's available at archive.org as well as your musopen.org site. I know you were just featured in a Google Doodle for Smetana's birthday.
That's right.
I think it was a clip from the Moldau. Can you talk about that and about any other high-profile uses you've had?
Yeah, that was pretty straightforward. Google asked for a license and asked to use the music for their doodle to celebrate his, I think it was 250th birthday or something like that. It was a beautiful animation. For those that haven't seen it, you should check it out on the Google Doodle homepage. And it was just a great example of the ways that you can use this music. That if they had gone with a commercial licensing, it could have taken weeks or months and would have cost a fortune. And the music ought to be in the public domain. The sheet music has fallen into it. So it was a great example. I've seen a lot of use cases. Some I discovered later. Everything from TV commercials, independent films, video games, waiting room music. I heard something in the U.S. Senate. Someone uses this as waiting room music, which is pretty amazing. A lot of the things I see the most are probably independent films and video games. It's probably the most frequent.
And you've just launched a classical music app as well that does a live stream of classical music, a radio app. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So we started this. You mentioned LPs. It's an interesting kind of question for the organization. We began with, we want to increase access to public domain music and classical music. But ironically, over time itself will do that. Barring any copyright law changes where the U.S. makes it indefinite, it'll be after my lifetime, but all CDs, all LPs, this will all become public domain. It'll just take hundreds of years. So one benefit of our organization is we speed up that process a little bit. Another benefit is we might get higher quality recordings earlier, as you mentioned. But one of the things we're thinking is, what else can we do with the music that we have, and what other kinds of benefits can we bring to people? So one way is leveraging the archive that we've created. So, for example, the classical radio app, why have people pay for, or in addition to what they pay for, why not have something that's really easy, that broadens exposure and makes it more fun? And we've also lately looked a lot at music education. Is probably something that we're going to be investing very heavily in the next few years.
So like a music theory textbook, or a music, even an appreciation textbook, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. We actually started as part of a Kickstarter. We raised, some of the money we raised was for a music theory textbook, which we've written. And ironically, music professors we've reached out to, many of whom helped contribute and write the book, don't have a strong incentive to spend hours and hours changing their syllabus, checking the book. They're heavily incentivized to use the existing texts that they have and the systems that they have in place. So we didn't see a lot of bang for the buck there. And actually, when we think about access, that's a very niche application, music theory in particular. It's very academic. It's higher education, like college level usually. So the kinds of stuff we're looking at is much more fundamental. I want to learn to play the piano. I want to learn about classical music, or I want to learn to write music. How do we help people do that for free so that they eventually can discover it, fall in love with it, and then go from there?
Have you followed the Muse Score project at all? And what are your thoughts on that?
We have. I've been in touch with a lot of similar projects. MuseScore, IMSLP. From time to time, they'll pass inquiries from people that wrote to the wrong project, confusing them. What they do is great. I believe they have a commercial entity as well. I'm not clear what either one focuses on. I guess it's trying to monetize the app. But they're increasing access for people to be able to share and create music, which is great, and reducing the barriers for people using notation software. We had played around with that as well, hoping to do something web-based, because I think that will ultimately be the future. People shouldn't have to download an exe file to do this. I think we'd have to raise a lot of money to do that really well, but hopefully someone in the future will create that.
What do you think of the idea of even having these scores in a digital format, and then having the like a MIDI sequencer play them as a way of distributing the information? That way, when you scan the sheet music, you also, or when you digitize the sheet music, you also get a sample of what it sounds like as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We worked with the Goldberg Variations project, another Kickstarter, and worked with them to help promote their project and see that they get funded. As part of their project, they digitize the Goldberg Variations. It's also something that we've looked at ourselves. We've hired people to go and digitize scores to see what the cost would be per page, per piece of music. We had a vision where any piece of music you look up on Musopen, if you're learning it, you could skip to a section, hear it played. And for just archival purposes, it's really a question of cost. It would be a massive undertaking. It would require either a significant number of crowdsourcers. There are potential copyright issues where if what you create looks like a modern edition that has some changes, that could run into issues.
Sure.
But ultimately, I think we just saw this as like, what's the cost versus benefit? If you have a PDF and the quality is good enough, then the application for what you've described is really very niche. If we already can get the recording by hiring a musician, I'd much rather do that. We're giving money now to some struggling or young performers, helping their profiles, rather than just paying someone somewhere to kind of Mechanical Turk crowdsource, digitize them and have a MIDI play it. So it's great. I would love to do it if we had recurring revenue that justified it. I would invest some amount every year, but currently that's not feasible.
Sure. Actually, I guess that brings me to my next question, which is, how do you add new music to the site, and how frequently do you do it? And if you could give people an idea of how much music is on the site already.
It's a good question. I actually haven't checked that in a while. We have both sheet music and music recordings. Sheet music is actually much more popular by 2 to 1 on our site, and has been for some time. When we had music recordings, we started marrying the two to try and accomplish the kind of thing that you were describing, where you could follow along a score and listen to it. I would say we have anywhere between 5 or 10,000 recordings, individual recording files, and we obtain it through a number of different ways. And most of them actually are just donations from amazing musicians, young and some professional. Some have gotten on labels and had to stop contributing because their profiles, not because of Musopen, just separately increased so much, which is amazing. But so we have some very amazing artists that have contributed. We also do Kickstarters, and we also, as we have funding, we'll just hire individuals to record things that people have requested or that we think are particularly going to be particularly valuable to contribute.
Are there any recordings that particularly stand out?
There are a couple that I like a lot. We have a set of the Goldberg variations, which I really like. We have, I think, all the Beethoven piano sonatas, which is a huge undertaking and completely donated by an individual. So that was amazing. And it's a great set. We paid to record all of the Chopin music, all the solo piano Chopin music, which is also has some real gems. Like any recordings, depending on how elitist or snobby, you can say they're garbage, you can say they're amazing. I think to your average listener, a lot of what we have is quite good and would be hard to just distinguish from a commercial recording. But those are some of the ones that stand out to me.
Now, some of the recordings on your site are only Creative Commons, no commercial.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage would you say that is on the site?
Yeah, that's definitely a minority. We started accepting that because we would have artists that, as I mentioned, some would be on labels and would want to contribute or change the attribution, or a lot of people that just want to contribute but aren't comfortable with a kind of endless, completely free, really what we started to do, which is a pure public domain CC0 attribution. And so I determined that the value of having something that people can use and enjoy for free outweighed the cost of not being able to potentially resell it. But I would say that that's probably 5 to 10% of the library, maybe at times 15%.
Are there any recordings you're particularly looking towards, or maybe music that you're looking forward to getting in the public domain with things entering the public domain now?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've definitely followed that very closely. There's some orchestral work that I would like to do, but that's a few years off. I mentioned actually in a radio program a couple years ago that we love the Lark Ascending from Vaughan Williams. I think that's still a ways away from being able to record that. In the nearer term, I think there's some George Gershwin that we could potentially record. I think some of that has started to fall in the public domain. So that would be pretty cool. I'd have to look. We do keep tabs on that, and there's probably some interesting opportunities to align maybe a future Kickstarter to something like that.
And
but
Oh, I'm
Separately,
sorry.
I would say I want to diversify the instrumentation a little bit. So we have a lot that's piano, we have some that's orchestral. I'd like to, in the near term, try and get more guitar, string, violin kinds of music.
One thing that I noticed, I went looking for it when I was just curious if you had any, was like medieval choral work or something like that, which I think would be interesting for people to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody approached you about that?
We do have some choral work. I think some of it, I don't know if it's medieval, it may be Baroque. We do have some choral work. Most of that is just what's donated from those musicians. So we haven't sought after that, just generally because it's less popular. But one of the things we did think a benefit of Musopen, at least hypothetically, is that we could record things that don't have commercial incentives to record. So if you think about J.S. Bach, he had 5 or 10 brothers that were also very talented, and many people have never heard or recorded a lot of their works. So that's something that in theory, Musopen could do a project just to record things that haven't been recorded before. So that's a good example of the kinds of stuff that we could think about.
That's very interesting. What starts you making a Kickstarter? How frequently do you run them? Do you feel there's demand in the market, or is it time? Or
That's a good question. I base them, so they're every few years now. We're quite a ways away from the last one. It must be something like between 3 and 5 years, something like that, which is much further than we'd like it to be. But I try and base it on, does the value of the idea or the idea itself warrant asking people for a lot of money? And I think the first 2 that we did. One was just to even prove the concept of hiring one of the best orchestras, a top 5 orchestra in the world, which is pretty unique. The second is to record the life's work, or try to record the life's work of a single composer and give it away for free, which I think we ended up like 4 pieces away from. And in time, I'd like to just record those. So that was also pretty amazing. So I would want something equally as valuable to the public. So we're actually thinking about running one in the vein of education, which I mentioned earlier. If we felt that we had something that could adequately enable someone to learn an instrument completely on their own for free, and we think it would be worthy of asking people for money to help build, then we would certainly consider that.
do you see uptake in like elementary schools that don't have necessarily budgets for textbooks and stuff like that?
Yes, definitely. The education piece, there's probably two facets. One is the consumer self-learner, which is usually someone older, it could be high school and up, and actually frequently is sort of 30 or 40 years and older. And then there's the education piece within existing like K through 12 education or college. So the college, I think we've contributed. We have this textbook, it's a resource, and we play around with how we visualize it and share it. K through 12 is interesting. There are a lot of very cheap, $1 to $5 apps that teachers will use to make music engaging. So it's not something that we've spent too much time on. It's very visual. It requires a particular set of knowledge and skills. And in terms of long-term impact, it's hard to assess. Whereas we're thinking about something equivalent to Duolingo, if you've seen it, or Code Academy, Khan Academy, something which is for older students, but where it's much easier to measure our impact, where how many people stick with it. If we have 20 lessons, do they complete all of them? Can we get them to post, videos or audio showing that they've learned an instrument? Because then we know we're investing in the right kinds of things.
Do you listen to modern classical music at all?
I personally do, sure.
I guess, is there anything modern that you look forward to in 75 or 100 years becoming public domain?
I think most people will, 75, who knows what music will look like then. It will probably be some virtual reality pill that we consume. I think probably an easy one will be John Williams, which right now, anytime a classical radio station is fundraising, they play John Williams 24/7. So I think that's going to be a popular one to share out.
Okay, Aaron Dunn, thank you very much, and we'll be sure to keep an eye out for those Kickstarters.
Terrific. It was great chatting. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next, we discuss text digitization. I'm talking to Lyndon Hamilton, General Manager of Project Gutenberg Distributed Proofreaders. It's a site that rescues out-of-copyright texts and converts them to electronic formats that can be read on e-readers and computers. First, Linda, why is it this important, and what's the difference between one of your editions and like a PDF containing scans of the pages that you can download from Google Books or the Internet Archive?
One of the main differences is that it's straight real text. The others are pictures of words, so that you can't really change the size of the text and or the color and the background and all of those sort of things to make them easier to read and do really good searches on the content because they're not words, they're just pictures. And I've read sometimes PDF images of books where I can't get them any other way, and it's rather limited. In order to get them to the size where it's comfortable to read at times, I have to scroll back and forth across the page. But I never have to do with that with the books that we prepare, which can be formatted and you can copy text and do quotes and everything else because it's real words, not pictures.
And I would assume that it's also a much smaller file as well, correct?
Oh, definitely. And it can be converted into several different formats. So if you have a really low-end system, you can bring it as straight low-end text, or you can bring it in as HTML, like a web page, or as e-reader formats. And it's very easy to convert once we've done what we've done.
What are some notable texts that distributed proofreaders has converted?
We've done it's hard to tell because we've done 37,000 almost. We're within 100 of 37,000. But just looking at the books that we've done over the last week, things like Tea, It's Mystery and History, The Pavement Masters of Siena, poems by Edna St. Vincent Millay, they're gorgeous. Common Sense for Housemaids, The French Revolution. They're, and we've done a good portion of Shakespeare and Dickens and all of the classics, Bible texts. It's an amazing amount of works.
I mean,
London and the London Poor is one major one that we've done. Sorry, I should mention Richard Burton's famous books. We've done several of those.
the Arabian Nights.
Yes, in unexpurgated.
Yes. Um, I mean, 37,000, that sounds like a large majority of the contents of Project Gutenberg. Is that correct?
We're the largest group that actually gives works to Project Gutenberg, though we're about 60 to 70%, I believe.
How many volunteers do you have?
On the books, we've got 100,000 or more.
Oh,
However, yes, but active, it's about 1,200 to 1,500 in a month. But that doesn't mean that they're inactive if they're not on our site, because some of them are working behind the scenes, preparing a book in early or later stages, and drop by when they're ready to submit it.
what is the process if somebody wanted to volunteer for the site? What do they have to do?
Well, they come into the web page, pgdp dot let's see .net,
Net.
and then there's a button where they can actually volunteer and give us the information we need and read our privacy guidelines and that, and then sign up.
And then the first phase of being a volunteer is the basic proofing and smooth reading, correct?
Yes, you can do that right off the bat once you start, though we do push for people to at least read the basic guidelines for proofreading, though the smooth readers can start right away with just reading the information on the main smooth reading page. The difference is that the people that do the actual proofreading are actually looking at a copy of the text, and the optical character recognition that the computer does its best guess at what that picture of the text is in real words, and then they're comparing the two. But for smooth readers, they take a text that's been prepared already by our volunteers, and they're doing one of the last checks of it as a normal reader, reading the text carefully. So they'll notice that Mrs. Havisham shouldn't be Mrs. Vavasham on page 31.
And what happens after somebody has done that for a period of time, the basic proofreading or the smooth reading?
They can move on to more complex levels. Like there are 3 levels of proofreading, so that the more skilled ones, people with a little bit more experience, move on to level 2, which actually looks at the same pages that were done in level 1 and goes over them for any other errors that were missed by the beginners or the people who worked in that round. Then level 3, you have to prove real skill, and you're looking at them from the same pages that were done on the first 2 levels. We hope to get rid of most of the proofing errors that way. Then it's looked at for 2 rounds of formatting, which is we're looking for bolds and italics and formatting the text so that it's ready for the pretty close to final stage of the post-processors, who are good with HTML and putting all of the single pages together, because the way our volunteers work at it is a page at a time. So somebody might go in and proofread a page in one book and then say, oh, I'm tired of that book, I'll go and do another book and do 2 or 3 pages there. But the post-processor takes all of those separate pages, pulls them all together, takes a look at the images, cleans up any scratches in them, and straightens them up, and puts them in the right spot of the text, does all of the linking from the table of contents to the right pages and that, and actually does an HTML version and a text version that can be ready to send off to Project Gutenberg. And then it goes to smooth readers at that point, before they send to Project Gutenberg, just to do a final check as a normal reader would.
And what percentage of your 100,000 volunteers are just initial readers, and how many are more of the higher levels?
They're more in the initial readers than in the first and second stage of proofreaders than they are in the formatting level 1 than they are at the 3rd level of proofreading. We have, I was doing some statistics the other day, we have about 320 or so people in the 3rd level of proofreaders. And we have 124 in the 2nd level of formatting. So the majority are going to be in the earlier rounds.
I see.
And there's also a special role called a project manager, who actually picks the books and prepares them so that they can be proofread page by page, which is a major job.
How does somebody get to be a project manager and suggest text?
Well, they actually just need to have done some proofreading and formatting, a certain number of pages, and been on the site for a while. And they need to be good to a certain extent with computers, because sometimes they're doing the optical character recognition computer work themselves. And they need to often break apart the book into the pages. And then they need to be good with people to be able to answer questions as the projects go through the rounds, and figure out what should be the rules on certain odd parts of the books.
What are some of the oddities that can be in books, like math or foreign languages? How do you handle them?
Well, we're international, and as far as the foreign languages, we have a lot of volunteers that are in Europe and other parts of the world. So at any given time, people are working on the pages in multiple languages all around the world.
And what about math?
Math has always been a problem. We still work with it, but we've used something called latex to convert the formulae. But having experts with the math has always been a challenge. We have done a number of math books, but it's not as easy as our normal books. And some books are particularly hard because they're very, very old. And we also have handwritten books. Like we've been working with a project with where we get in astronomical observations that were put in notebooks, and people actually look at the text at the top and convert it into regular words. So it isn't all actual typeset work that we do, and those are a challenge as well.
Oh,
So
cookbooks too.
yes, sometimes the formatting and spelling text with all of the strange diphthongs and things that you have to do on a spelling text. Uh, it can be a challenge on certain types of books.
Now, what do you do for spellings if there's a misspelling within the book or alternate spellings?
Well, most of our books are before 1923 or at least 1923 because of the copyright, because we go with the American copyright rules. And the rules for spelling, especially the older books, are quite diverse. So we ask our proofreaders to watch for something that they think might be an error and do a note beside it so that the post processor can decide what to do. Some of them correct and do proofers notes at the transcribers notes at the end of their text to say what's being changed.
Are there any goals or books that you look to acquire that you haven't done already, or big projects that you guys are working towards?
We do have big projects. There's a number of them, and some are rather challenging, some big encyclopedias and things like that. Um, but mostly it's the project managers who decide, unless an organization comes to us and says we would really like to work with you to transcribe certain text. At the moment, we're working with the Mundanium Museum in Brussels to transcribe some of their works, and they provide it. We double check that it's copyright free in the States, and then we put it through. And it can be a big project. And we have a number of things like that on the go. But it's mostly up to the project manager. Some of them decide this is really exciting. I want to do this whole group of books. And then we check whether they're already at Project Gutenberg, and then that project manager manages it and puts it through the rounds and tries to put some rules so that they're done in a similar way by the proofers and post processors and formatters.
I'm sorry, you said the Museum Mundanium?
Yes,
What is that exactly?
that's a museum in Brussels, and
Oh,
it's doing a conference at the moment that has some shows to do with technology and words and text.
what type of text do they want converted?
These were historical texts that they had in picture format that they wanted to actually have transcribed, mostly French.
Oh, I see. Do you find it's easy to get volunteers, international volunteers, or is it easier to get the English speakers?
English speakers are always a little bit more common, but a certain percentage of our books are done in different languages. The most common of our volunteers are German and French, but we also have a lot of Spanish-speaking and Italian volunteers. But
And
it's more of a challenge to get it all through the rounds quickly if the language is one of those. But it's really challenging if it's something like Polish. or finish where we don't have many volunteers.
So that would be something that I guess you would look forward to in the project, to get more volunteers from other languages.
Yes, it's always nice to have them, but I'm always keen to get more in the ones we already have a community for, because that makes it grow even more and more books, which I really look forward to.
Is the rate at which you're putting out books increasing?
It's I don't believe it's really increasing. It stays about pretty stable over the years. It's surprising because we've been told that usually our volunteers drop off over the years on internet volunteering. Some of the big organizations have always complained about that, but we tend to keep a fairly stable base of volunteers all working away. It doesn't seem to, at least touch wood, change very much. And we've been going for almost 19 years now.
That's very impressive. I guess, is there anything that you'd like the public to know about Project Gutenberg Distributed Proofreaders that I haven't asked you about?
Well, one thing is that it's a community. It isn't just proofreading books. We have massive forums where people discuss the books, but also their interests. We have a knitters forum and people discussing issues of the day and the books they've read and books they'd like to see and things like that. It's people. Some people just come to proofread a few pages. Others stay to talk and also proofread and format.
Well, thank you very much, Linda Hamilton. It's been very informative. I hope people will go to your site and volunteer. That's pgdp.net. And thank you again for talking with me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thanks for listening.